Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alex.
Hey, Alex. So we are done with regular season week 2. So we are like flying through the season already. Week 2 is in the books. And to our listeners, as always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, commenting on our podcast videos. Please subscribe to us on the socials. We are on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, and Threads with the handle at N2EFantasy. Alex, what do we have on today's show?
Today's show, we are going to be going over each week 2 matchup and kind of talk about the points that we want to talk about. So performances, injuries, news, anything that we can about those so that we can keep you guys informed. All right. So we can just go ahead and start with our takeaways from the Thursday night matchup, the Vikings at the Philadelphia Eagles. And Jeff, is Jalen still playing hurt, that quarterback there for the Eagles?
I see what you did there, Jalen Hurts. According to Donovan McNabb this week, he is still playing hurt with the shoulder, and that kind of makes sense because he passed the ball 23 times for 193 yards, and it was only a 6-point game when it was all said and done. And I know the Eagles did have control of the game, but and I know that Swift ran the ball 28 times. Do you believe that Swift is now the lead back in Philly, or do you think this is going to be a week-to-week thing?
I think it's going to be a week-to-week thing. I think he's looked the most electric to me because Kenneth Gainwell played all right, but Swift looked like he was trying to prove a point week 2, and I think he looked pretty great. However, they've got 3 high-profile running backs, and then they have a 4th running back in Boston Scott that they really like, and he was playing pretty well before he went out with an injury. So it's going to be a mixed bag every week. But I think that when he plays, Swift will probably be very usable, probably more usable than some of the other ones.
Agreed. Kenny G and Swift will probably be the lead too, because I think Penny will take a back seat to them. But I did see that AJ Brown was getting frustrated with not getting targeted a ton. And it's interesting because they're winning. That should be enough, but is not enough for AJ Brown. The team still doesn't look 100% right after losing both coordinators this offseason either. So it looks like they're trying to find their identity going forward with that. We do know how Josh Allen has played without Brian Dable, and I just feel like without Steichen, Hurts could be hurt by that as well. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all that. And it's funny that earlier you mentioned Donovan McNabb because one of his wide receivers, Terrell Owens, would also have fits like this if he wasn't getting the ball enough. So that was very reminiscent of the TO time period for the Eagles when AJ Brown was yelling at the team on the sideline. And that's not something that you want. Obviously, out of all the positions, receivers tend to be the most diva-like. And he clearly wasn't happy that Smith was getting the ball a lot more. I think that's something that's going to be addressed, and I think that it will be resolved moving forward. They're still going through growing pains, like you've mentioned, with both their coordinators becoming head coaches elsewhere. They're going to get used to their new coordinators, and it's going to take some time. And if Jalen Hurts is still playing hurt, it's going to take some time for him to feel closer to 100% as well. Let's not forget that week 1 was a tough matchup against the Patriots, and the Vikings were playing with something to prove and trying to prove that Kirk Cousins isn't bad in every primetime game. So I thought that the Eagles are making strides, and they still look like one of the better teams, if not top 2 team in the NFC so far. But I thought the Vikings played very, very well, at least on their passing side. Their defense made some plays. I don't think their defense is perfect, but I thought Kirk Cousins played as well as you could ask any quarterback to play in a primetime game, and he was let down. The running back fumbled. Uh, his top wide receiver, Justin Jefferson, fumbled at the goal line on a pretty crazy play that he should have maintained it. He should have been able to go through it, but he was really pushing himself for that touchdown. And fumbled it, got a touchback. I just thought there's just bad plays that ruined it for the Vikings, and they could have won this game. And I don't put the blame on Kirk Cousins for this one at all. So I don't know how you felt about that. And you, as a Justin Jefferson owner, I wonder how you felt about that missed touchdown opportunity.
Yeah, he didn't really cost me anything because he still put up crazy numbers. But I am starting to get worried about Madison, and we'll just kind of see what happens with Madison the next few games because A, he wasn't effective, and B, he fumbled the ball twice, once on a pass play, once on a rush play, and he lost them both. So just something to watch out for. And going back to AJ Brown's frustration, he had to watch his mate and Devonta Smith catch another touchdown pass. So I just think that the touchdowns are going to be fluky between the two of them, and we're going to see which receiver scores each week. Right now, early on, it's been Devonta Smith. I mean, this was just a clinic by some great wide receivers. Even Addison looked good for Minnesota. So I think there was 4 wide receivers that are like pretty studly.
Wide receiver didn't look studly is KJ Osborne. He's never lived up to his talent, and he had two crucial drops. I think both of them on third down, and he only got that one like wide open touchdown pass when no one was around him. So that was the only time he could concentrate on the ball. But Addison and Jefferson look phenomenal. Hawkinson looks great as well at the tight end position.
All the
He got paid,
Suns.
and yeah, he got paid, and he's still playing well. I really liked Smith for the Eagles. I think he's the best receiver that they have technically. And I think that A.J. Brown is the most physically gifted wide receiver on that team. And he's a really good explosive receiver when he gets the ball in his hands. I think it will even out for them at some point. And I think both of them are guys you still have to keep starting no matter what until otherwise told. But I think that you just have to trust these guys. They're talented, and yes, they're going to have some disappointing weeks, but they're also going to have some big boom weeks as well. Whereas I think for Minnesota, Addison and Jefferson are a lot more reliable on a week to week basis because it seems like Addison's going to get you 60 yards and a touchdown each week, and Jefferson's going to get you 150 yards and ten targets at least each week, too. So I really feel good about the passing side. Madison at the running back position looks like a total bust there, and it looks like they're actually missing Dalvin Cook. So they may make some moves for a running back at some point. I don't know. And the Philly running back group, I would say Swift might have the slight edge there, but I think they're going to use Gainwell. I think they're going to use Scott. I don't know what they're going to do about Penny. I don't know if Penny's going to be somebody who they plug in whenever someone's hurt, but I don't know what to do about that. But so far, Swift has had the best single week performance 2 weeks in.
Yeah, and I think we've really so this was one of the games of the week, and I think we really did it some justice here. We can move on to the Ravens and the Bengals, which the Bengals start out 0-2. And I know you're a big Bengals and a big Joe Burrow believer. And yeah, this is kind of where we're at with the Bengals being 0-2. Burrow does appear to be hurt again. So that's a problem going into this week playing the Rams on Monday night. But the Bengals started off slow and they were very slow to get going. But they did finally get going a bit, and Higgins caught 2 touchdowns. But to lose 2 division games out of the gate and one of them at home, that is a big deal. And I think the Bengals are starting off behind the 8 ball, and we'll see what happens with them going forward. But they could be a team that trades Higgins mid-season if this woes and this trend continues.
Well, I think both of us anticipated the Bengals starting off slowly this year with the Burrow injury. I've been steadfast since preseason, since he first got injured, that they should have put him on IR or pup list, rest him, let his calf get healthy before playing him. And I think that they got afraid that with their backup quarterback situation, that they weren't going to look they were going to lose the games. Well, guess what? You had Burrow. You still lost the games. His calf still isn't healthy. In fact, it's re-injured. You may have restarted the healing process now. So now instead of potentially losing 4 games to start the season, you might lose 6. You might lose more. At what point do you shut down Burrow to try to like preserve his health? And like you said, if they now have to put Burrow on IR or the pup list, like 2, 3, 4 weeks into the season, and they start that process, That's 8 games that potentially they could lose. And then, like you said, they'll be looking at trading away Higgins because it's going to be a lost season anyway. And they have no intention of paying him what he's asking for. So Bengals may have a lost season at this point, all because they didn't go ahead and put Joe Burrow on the shelf early on. And on the other side, the Ravens look like they're still figuring out the offense, but they look much better now, like 2 weeks in. I think that Lamar really likes working with the rookie Zay Flowers, who's someone I really loved in the pre-draft process. And OBJ has looked closer to himself when he's healthy, but the problem with OBJ is how long is he going to be healthy for? So he always has these nagging injuries that pop up at some point. I don't think that the running backs are anything to really own unless you need like a week one filler, and that's it. I think that's going to be a passing offense and really good defense. So I think they're going to play managing offense and play really good defense. I think that's how they're going to try to win the games. And right now, they're looking pretty good 2 weeks into the year, and I think that the Ravens might be the now lead dog to potentially be the division winners at this point. But this is 2 weeks in, so it's early, but it looks like it's going to be that way, especially with some other news that we'll have later on about this division. But Jeff, what were your takeaways for this matchup?
Oh boy. As you said, Lamar is looking better as a pass thrower. This connection with Flowers is amazing because that's one of the rookie receivers that are taking right off as far as targets and being a go-to weapon for the quarterback. OBJ is hurt, so we'll see if he misses any time with his ankle injury. And Bateman isn't really ownable if we're being honest with the Ravens right now. I'm glad that I did not get any shares of him. But the Bengals are in trouble right now. They're really in trouble. Their season could go south really quickly. The Ravens do look like the real deal, and they do look like they could run away with this division because the Bengals are already 2 games behind the Ravens in the standings after 2 games. So, and they have a game in hand. So they might not even get the divisional tiebreaker, which will be a huge problem a little bit later in the season. And we'll see what happens, but they really need to get the ship righted as soon as possible. So Burrow missing no time would be the most ideal situation here, but I don't see that happening. Whether it's this game or a future game, I do see him missing some games.
But as far as the Ravens are concerned, business is blooming there with Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers. Okay, let's talk about the Chicago Bears at Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jeff, one of your favorite topics, Justin Fields. How do you feel about Justin Fields and this offense?
All right. So to our never too early family, it is time for the Chicago Bears to move on from Justin Fields. He is not good. He is not going to be the quarterback that they want him to be. We'll get everything out of the way here. The coaching staff is not good. The offensive line is not good, but Justin Fields is equally not good. He's completing roughly 50% of his balls. He's not running a lot, which might be a scheme of this offense right now to just kind of see what Fields can do. But whatever he's being asked to do right now, he cannot do. He's missing wide open wide receivers. He's running into sacks. I think that the Bears now, and I think the Chicago front office knows that it is time to move off of Justin Fields this season. And with so many good quarterbacks coming out in the draft this year, it's time to move off of Fields. I understand why they didn't do it last year, especially watching Bryce Young, especially watching Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud. I see why they didn't do it this year. There isn't a guy that they felt super confident would be better than Fields, but I think there's going to be 3 or 4 guys that are better than Fields that come out of next year's draft. But the play that was the most disgusting in the entire game was the pick six that Fields threw from his own end zone. The game still was winnable at that point, and that pick six pretty much put the game out of hand. going through his reads is very difficult. So it's just something we're going to have to watch going forward because the Bears really don't have a backup quarterback that I think that they trust. So this might be Fields' show all the way to the end. But the way the Panthers and the Bears are playing right now, it's very likely that the Bears end up with 2 top 10 picks because I do have the Panthers 2024 pick. I'll let you rebut me.
Oh, I think criticisms of Justin Fields are pretty fair. I don't think he's alone to blame. Obviously, his shortcomings being able to read the defense. He's not shown that he can do that. He's not shown that he can play from the pocket. These are things that are very concerning. And it's also concerning that the offensive coordinator seems to not be very good at play calling. They did 3 of the same exact screenplays in a row, which led to the pick six. So when the defense see you do the same play in a row, in a row, in a row on the same drive, they're going to pick it off. So something has to change. Either the offensive coordinator needs to call a different play, they need to let Fields be able to make calls at the line of scrimmage to change things up. I don't know what the disconnect was. There were some weird pass protections that didn't make any sense at all, like a tight end cutting off the tackle from being able to actually fully block the pass rusher because he came in on a weird stunt in the middle where there's no one to block. So I don't know why that that happened. That was weird. And then both weeks, so week 1 and week 2, there's been weird plays where the wide receivers are stacked next to each other and run the exact same route, which should never happen. It should never happen in football. There's weird things going on with that whole offense. It's not just Fields, but Fields obviously isn't doing well enough. I think it's weird that they don't call enough designed run plays. I think he's done like maybe 4 designed run plays in 2 weeks, which for someone who rushed for 1,000 yards last year makes no sense at all. They need to do more play action. They need to have him roll out on a bootleg. They need to do more things with his mobility to help open things up. So there's just so much wrong with this team. I don't see it getting better. I don't think the coordinator's good. I don't think Josh Fields is good enough on his own. It just looks bad all around. But the one thing to me that doesn't look bad is my boy Roshan Johnson climbing up the depth chart. He is now number 2 behind Khalil Herbert, and it looks like they really almost split the snaps here. So I am excited to see Roshan move up. He's someone I really like. He's someone that Jeff, you scratched your head at when I first brought him up. But you're gonna see, Jeff. You're gonna see how good Roshan Johnson is. Oh, but we can talk about the Bucks too. Let's talk about the Bucks. They have surprised us 2 weeks in. I think we both called the Bucks winning this particular matchup after their week 1 success. And Rashad White has bounced back. Baker Mayfield's played well both weeks. A little surprising that he's kept it consistent. Mike Evans, again, to me, looks like the clear number 1 wide receiver for that team, or at least for big plays. Chris Godwin almost got a touchdown in this one. I think it just didn't work out for him. But those 3 guys, Rashad White, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, those are the guys that are going to get you the points. And maybe a Baker Mayfield every now and then too. Jeff, how do you feel about all these players?
Yeah, I'm still partial to Herbert. Herbert does still appear to be the starter, but Roshan is the very clear number 2 now. I think Foreman could move on from this team, whether it be a cut or there's going to be something that happens here. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I do love that Rashad White is starting to blossom because he was a guy that I was very high on. He was one of my few 200-point running backs this year. So I think there's only like 15 of them, and I always felt weird having him there. But this game kind of makes me feel a little vindicated of that because he can pass catch, he can run the ball. He's very versatile, and I do love the versatile backs. And with Fournette gone, like I did love him going into this year. Baker 2-0 with the Bucks. Do I expect them to keep it up this year? I do not, but I think that already they've taken themselves out of contention for the number 1 overall pick next year. I think 2 wins this early does that because they probably will beat the Panthers in Tampa at the very least this year. So that's a 3rd win. I'm a lot lower on the Panthers than I was before, but I guess this is to be expected with a growing pains year. But I expected a growing pains year with the Bucks. And I expected the Bears to come out of the gate after all the talk with Fields this offseason, 4,000 yards, gaining a different understanding of the offense and being able to call audibles, and it's just not showing up at all on film. So whatever it is, I think the Bears are a bottom 10 team in the league, and the Bucks are probably there too. But I think that the Bucks have a chance to be at least be a middling team, which you know what they say, you'd rather be the lowest team because that gets you the best chance to get the best player versus being a middling team and just being stuck there for a while. And that might be what happens to the Bucks going forward.
Yeah, I think that the Bears still have a chance to potentially right the ship. I think definitely Minnesota still has a chance to right the ship as well. But I think the Bucks might be peaking early. I think the Bucks and the team, a team like Arizona, who we can talk about a little bit later as well. I think that those teams are playing really hard, really fast, really early. I don't think it's sustainable for them, but good for the Bucks to win the first two matchups. I just think they won't finish that way. But that you might be right that they won't get a top pick now. But who knows how the rest of the season goes? Because I know the next episode we'll talk about week three matchups leading up to it, and they play the Eagles there. So I think their streak will end week three. But we can move on here to the Packers and Falcons. And man, did I really want to pick the Falcons last episode, but I thought that the Packers were going into the game with a little momentum, but it was very close to 50-50. It was 1 point difference at the end. Falcons pulled it off at home. Good for them. The Falcons are in a very weird situation offensively where they're just going to run the ball and they're going to get the ball to the running backs a lot. Kyle Pitts, I think his career is now over as far as I'm concerned. He's just going to get two receptions each week for like 20 yards and not look great. And Drake London had a nice week. I think that basically one catch really helped him out. And outside of that, I think that they really didn't pass that much and that they really just want to focus on running. And when it comes to the Packers, their defense is doing them lots of favors, getting them pretty good field positions. And Love just really has to be efficient. And when he's efficient, they score points. When he doesn't get as efficient, they really, really stall out. So he still looks like he's got some improvement to do, but he still played better than I expected 2 weeks into the season. So Jeff, how do you feel about these two guys or these two teams here?
Oh boy. The Packers definitely missed Aaron Jones. And I do think this was the difference in the game. Taking away that feature, that function of the offense is not good. I do think that Jordan Love is showing some promise. The ability to throw touchdown passes and no interceptions is actually huge because he has multiple touchdowns in the first two games, and I don't believe he's thrown one single interception yet. He's showing poise that I never thought that we would see from him, especially this early. And especially considering who he is throwing to. He's throwing to Romeo Dobbs, second year. He's throwing to Jaden Reed, first year. He's throwing to Wicks, first year. He's throwing to Musgrave, first. So he's got like a lot of inexperienced weapons, and he's still doing this. That's pretty incredible because I do think that I don't think there's any difference with him and Rodgers being there, to be honest. And that is kind of crazy to say. Like, I don't think Rodgers could have got off to any better of a start than Love has gotten off to this year. Ritter did look better. They rushed the ball 45 times between Ritter, Algier, and Bijan. So clearly they don't want him throwing the ball, which is totally fine and totally they're allowed to do that and hide him. But Drake London showed up. As you mentioned, Kyle Pitts is I just think they're going to only have one pass catcher that's worth the darn each week. And this week it was Drake London. Next week it could be Kyle Pitts. I did see a little bit of Mac Hollins this game. But the Packers' young wide receivers, they might have a few good wide receivers here that they've gotten and drafted this year. And they don't even have Christian Watson back, who's arguably their best wide receiver.
Yeah, so several points here to go over. When it comes to Jordan Love, I think the difference between him and Rodgers is Rodgers would have had more passing yards, but probably had an interception or two, whereas Love has just played efficiently. He only threw 25 times, completed 14 passes for 151 yards and three touchdowns. So it's just like just efficiency. Just throw it as few times as you can, as accurately as possible. They got the scores. the whole Green Bay offense played fewer snaps than the Falcons did. So I thought that was interesting. And I thought that the Falcons, like you said, the 45 rushes to the 32 passing attempts is very strange in a modern NFL, which most teams tend to lean towards 60% passing plays on offense. So it's complete opposite. Ritter didn't look that great to me in this matchup. I think Green Bay could have gotten more defensive touchdowns or more defensive interceptions in this one because there was several times where a Green Bay defender dropped the ball when Ritter threw. So Ritter didn't look good at all, which makes sense why they keep running as much as they do. I think that as far as receiving options, it's you really just want to start one of these guys if you're desperate. I don't think that you feel comfortable about starting London or starting Johnny Smith or Pitts or Hollins. It doesn't feel great to play one of those guys right now. But on the other side with Green Bay, it's the 151 passing yards that concerns me. I think that Jaden Reed's a good young receiver. I think he'll keep being good on the field. I think Dobbs will be good on the field. Musgrave will be good on the field. And I think Christian Watson will be good when he comes back. But will they get the targets that make them useful fantasy wise? Will they get the yardage and the touchdowns? Like, that's what I'm concerned with. However, if Jordan Love keeps throwing 3 to 4 touchdowns each week, it may make more guys usable because any of them could get touchdowns at any given time. I don't know if Green Bay has faced a team that can score on offense yet. So 2 weeks in, they played Chicago and the Falcons, and I don't think either one of those are high scoring offenses right now. Will Jordan Love be able to keep up with them if he has to keep going point for point? That I don't know yet. So, but so far he looks better than what I would have given him credit for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look forward to their matchup next week. They have a little bit more difficult of a matchup against the Saints defense. So it'll be interesting to see if Jordan Love can keep this up. If he can, then I feel like we have a whole bunch of people that need to buy into Jordan Love if he can do the same thing against the Saints defense that has been stifling not just this year, but the end of last year as well.
All right. Well, we can move on to the next matchup, which is the Indianapolis Colts and Houston Texans. So that was a game that I watched a lot of since it's my hometown Texans team, and it was one going into the game I thought the Texans were going to lose because they're all of a sudden going to miss both of their starting safeties, missing 4 of their starting offensive linemen, missing a couple of their backup linemen, and on to third stringers in some cases. So very concerning for those reasons. I thought CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson both played very well as rookie quarterbacks in this game, doing different things. So Stroud, more of the pure passer in this matchup and getting his touchdowns through the air. Anthony Richardson running on some design run plays that I thought he looked spectacular in, and I think Anthony Richardson looked better as a passer in this matchup for the few drives that he was in before he went out with a concussion. And I thought that Gardner Minshew was very efficient as a backup. I think it was a different kind of game by the time he was in there. Zach Moss is the best running back not named Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis, and probably for this game, he was the best performing running back, which was disappointing for the Texans because Damian Pierce couldn't get anything going with the offensive line as bad as it was. There's no room for Damian Pierce. I don't think that they play calling was very creative. However, I think that Nico Collins certainly got a lot of big plays. I think that Robert Woods was the third down receiver basically every single time for the Texans. Tank Dell played very well. We even got Dalton Schultz decent showing on the Colts side. I think the ball was spread around a little bit, and outside of that, Pittman was clearly the number one receiver with 12 targets and just not a lot of yardage and just not a lot of touchdowns out there. So, Jeff, what were your takeaways? I know you got some things to say about Richardson and Gardner Minshew.
Oh boy. So this is 2 games Richardson has not made it through. So I want to start there. So Minshew is definitely going to see his fair share of playing time this year. Minshew went 19 for 23. So he is very accurate. And he wasn't planning on playing this week. And he came in on a spot start, or basically spot action here. 171 and a touchdown, no picks. How do you feel about Richardson going forward? Do you feel like he is an injury risk? Or do you feel like this is just an aberration of his first 2 games?
So far, I feel like it's just an aberration. I think 2 weeks in, you can't really say whether or not someone is actually an injury risk or not. But I think it's just an aberration. The concussion play was kind of like a freak play, so I don't think that you can really put that on him. He's a rushing quarterback, so he's going to get leg issues at some point. But I just think that they got ahead, and by the time Minshew was in, I think it was a different kind of game, and I don't think that the Texans secondary could really handle the way that the game swung. So, and the fact that the Texans offense couldn't give any rest to the defense because they couldn't get anything going on the ground.
Yeah, so is it time to panic on the Texans yet?
No, I expected them to struggle this year. I don't think they're going to be the worst team in the league, but I don't think that they're going to make the playoffs. I never thought they were going to make the playoffs. I projected them to go 6-11, and I think that that's still a fair assessment. This was one of the games I had hoped that they would win, but going leading up to this game, it wasn't looking like they were going to win this game. And I think that they have some things to work out. Whereas I think Shane Steichen has been pretty good with the Colts and both of these quarterbacks, both Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew. And it's impressive that you can have two different style quarterbacks and have both of them look good in their own ways. So I think Steichen is a really good coach. And so far, the Texans offensive coordinator, who is a rookie offensive coordinator and rookie play caller, hasn't looked great.
Yeah, I can concur with that. How do you feel about Pierce? Is it time to panic on Pierce yet?
No, I think the time to panic is when the offensive line gets healthier and if he still can't do it.
Okay. And then, so your boy Nico is showing up, but it also looks like Dell, Woods, and Schultz are all involved. I would say an ideal game plan would be not throwing the ball 40 plus times a game, but we'll see what happens with that. That's kind of where we're at there with that team.
Yep, I hope both of these teams continue to improve because I really like both quarterbacks. Okay, let's move on to the Chiefs at Jaguars. I was pretty sure the Chiefs were going to win this one. They did. It was not the game that I think we were expecting. I think we were hoping for a game of the week, high scoring offense, and neither of these teams really showed a lot of offense in this one. So that was interesting. They're still kind of struggling a bit here. And it just seems like the Chiefs still can't figure it out offensively. And even with Kelsey back. And now all of a sudden, for the Jaguars, complete inverse. Instead of getting Ridley involved, Ridley seemed like he got shut down by the Chiefs corners and secondary. And now they were getting the ball to Christian Kirk a lot. So it's really weird that they can't balance it out. It's like one person's going to dominate that week, and that's not something fantasy owners want because you're going to get goose eggs and then you're going to get like 20 points, and that's not fun. You kind of want to even it out and get consistent play. What were your takeaways with this matchup?
Oh boy, this matchup did not go anything like I planned, so that's a problem. I don't even know where to start with this matchup because it was nothing like I had planned, but it doesn't appear that the offense is running on full cylinders yet. Would you completely agree with that?
It's almost like they changed offensive coordinators.
Maybe.
I think they have Matt Nagy as their offensive coordinator now, and I don't think he's very good.
But if I told you Mahomes, like the worst part about Mahomes was or the Kansas City Chiefs were going to be the offense this year, and their defense was actually going to be pretty good, I think that you would say they would figure it out by the end of the year if they have Patrick Mahomes, which makes them
Yeah.
probably one of the most dangerous teams in the NFL right now. So Jacksonville ran into a brick wall that they weren't expecting, first of all. Second of all, Mahomes restructured his deal this week, making him the most money ever and fully guaranteed the next 4 seasons. So there is that. We did think that was going to come in the off season, but when it didn't come by week 1, we just thought that was going to go to the wayside. There is no new money in this part of the deal, so they moved all the money in the back of the deal to the front of the deal. So I'm not sure what that means for the last few years of the deal. Is he making like 10 million a year the last few years? Or do we see more restructures and more redos on the contracts coming forward? Either way, he's tied to Kansas City for probably the next 10 years because this is year 1 of that 10-year deal right now. So I think that was Kansas City's biggest thing, is to get him tied down. As far as the Jaguars go, they regressed, but I think it's because they ran into a good defense. Kirk is back, but Ridley goes quiet. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when they get both wide receivers going. Even Zay Jones was pretty quiet this week. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens going forward. As far for Kansas City, Sky Moore got going, but I do expect Kelsey to see more targets as he gets more healthy in the season. He did catch a touchdown, which is what you expect Travis Kelsey to do. But I expected this to be the game of the week. I expected this to be the highest scoring game of the week, and it was not. One last Jacksonville question for you. Where did your boy, Tank Bigsby, go?
Don't know. I don't know what happened to him. All I know is that Jacksonville's offense just looked bad altogether.
Yeah, he disappeared. We might need to like have a Where's Waldo search for him. Where's Tank Bigsby?
Oh.
And I think that's a problem because I think they need him. They need him to pair with ETN. Like they're a great combo together because they don't really duplicate each other's skill set. So to not use him at all was a little perplexing. And I do expect the Jaguars to bounce back next week against the Texans. This week, they did not look like a playoff winner. They do look like a playoff team still. But also, Jacksonville's defense might be better than we think.
Is it the defense or is it Kansas City just being terrible for Kansas City standards?
I'm not sure. I think this was a defensive matchup that we didn't see coming. And I'm a little disappointed because I started my Chiefs, I started my Jaguars, and expected 70 points like the Dolphins and the Chargers the week before and did not get that.
No, at least not from this matchup, but we will talk about the game of the week in a couple minutes. Actually, no, did I even talk about Sky Moore in this one? Didn't talk about Sky Moore, did I?
You did not.
Sky, Sky Moore, for those of you who held on strong and kept Sky Moore, he had his week. He had a 54-yard catch in the touchdown and really made it work for you guys. He was the most productive receiving option on the entire Kansas City squad. So kudos for all you guys who kept him like I did. I hope to see more big plays from him on a more consistent basis, but I think he will be the wide receiver for them as much as you can get from this Kansas City team outside of Travis Kelsey. But yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw you put all your Moors in there. Don't think that you just slid them in.
All right, let's move on to the Chargers at Titans. This looked like to me a very much defensive battle for a lot of this game. They kept sacking the quarterback. Tannehill absolutely got demolished by the Chargers pass rush and still held on. And still, when he threw the ball, looked still pretty good and accurate. And it was very interesting seeing an old man get beat up and still have some fight in him. Herbert is 0-2, and they lost to the Titans, who the offensive line on the Titans looked terrible. It looks absolutely atrocious, and it's a lot of their starting players. So there's no blame on really the injuries out there because it's mostly starters, and they still look terrible. Yes, the Chargers have Bosa and Khalil Mack, but that is just so bad. And at least Burks got a nice showing for those of you who dropped him week one. I'm sorry that happened to you. I did say try to hold on to him if you can, but yes, he only got one really big play, so it's not like consistent. So I don't know if he's going to do this again. DeAndre Hopkins, he got peppered with targets, didn't really get the yardage that you would want. Didn't look that great either. Henry didn't look super great in this one as well. It really like I was concerned that neither of these teams was going to go over 20 points at one point. So that was weird. We did tell you guys to start Keenan Allen, and Keenan Allen absolutely exploded. They got 8 catches, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. Both benefited me and killed me in different leagues. Benefited me in one of my longest running leagues and killed me in the league where I faced Jeff this weekend. And it happened to be the league that Jeff got revenge on me for winning the championship against him last year.
Backing into the championship because of DeMar Hamlin.
Oh my God, Jeff, we let you have a redo and you still lost, okay? Get over it.
I was down 5 points and I had Josh Allen left.
I mean, they shouldn't have canceled the
Anyways,
game. Yeah, I
yeah.
know, but
Switching focus to this game, though, Keenan Allen continues to be a weapon in this league. And he's old. He overcame the injury prone title that everyone gave him. and he just balls out. Like he's he is an amazing weapon, and I feel like this coaching staff is wasting Herbert. I feel like they're wasting Allen, probably the last couple of years of his career. And they're wasting Eckler, who is probably going to leave the Chargers after this season. Interesting tidbit is there is no timetable for Eckler's injury, and the NFLPA this week there was a grievance filed against them by the NFL because they're saying that they told the running backs to milk injuries. So it does seem like something is going on there, but the Chargers should have won this game. The Chargers should have won the first game. They're making stupid mistakes. Their defense is not playing up to par. They have a defensive head coach. There's no excuse for it. It's time to move on from Brandon Staley. They almost did it last offseason. His seat has to be white hot, and they have to be ready to get rid of him.
Oh man, is Kellen Moore going to get a head coaching job this
He
season?
does. He deserves it.
I don't think their offense has been that spectacular. I mean, obviously, sans Eckler. When Eckler's out there, I don't think anyone can deny their offense looks electric because he is the number one option for them. Keenan Allen's the second, in my opinion, when both of them are out there, but both of them are phenomenal. I don't think Herbert has looked super great the first 2 weeks into it, but he's not looked bad either. I expected him basically have like nearly 400 yards in this matchup, but he he still played pretty well, and it's very disappointing for Josh Kelly to not be able to get anything on the ground. But Tennessee does have a good run defense, so he's not an elite player like Eckler is. So I can understand him struggling a little bit there. Derrick Henry, if he didn't have that touchdown, I don't think this would have been that great of a matchup. And I think that Tyjae Spears is starting to nibble away a little bit. He looks more effective on a consistent basis. Henry should have had more yards off of 25 rushes, in my opinion. I just think the Titans' offensive line is one of the worst offensive lines in the league, if not the worst at this point. So good for them for somehow managing to win a game. I think a lot of it came down to their defense and just the grit that Tannehill showed after being sacked, I think, 5 times in this matchup. So Chargers in a bad spot, starting off 0-2. Not great. Tennessee might end up at this point. They're tied for first in the AFC South, 1-1 with Jacksonville and the Colts. Very weird situation to be in. Still just 2 weeks in, so we'll see how these teams improve. I think that the Chargers will definitely get more wins.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hoping that they'll start rebounding this week, but this is going to be the game of the week, in my opinion, coming up, and we'll talk about it in our upcoming preview episode. But basically, it's the Chargers versus the Vikings, two 0-2 teams, desperate for a win with two of the best playing quarterbacks, in my opinion, this year so far, Cousins and Herbert. So this should be a game that balls out.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about that in the next episode. All right, let's try to power through the rest of the matchups here for you guys. We have the Raiders at Bills. It looks close for a couple of minutes here, and then the Bills just completely ended up trouncing the Raiders. And that's a much needed bounce back for the Bills and Josh Allen. So, Jeff, how did you feel about this matchup?
So the this wasn't really even a matchup, in my opinion. The Bills bounced back in a big way. Josh Allen played mistake-free football, only rushed the ball 3 times, and I think that's in part because they targeted Diggs a lot less. We mentioned last week that forcing it to him was the big mistake maker. James Cook, welcome to starting lineups. He deserves to be started every week at this point as an RB2 or a flex play. But as we predicted, he was vultured by Harris and Latavius Murray. So it's all very predictable. We did think that he was going to be electric. We just thought that he was going to have trouble scoring touchdowns, and he absolutely did have trouble scoring touchdowns.
Well, I don't think he had trouble scoring touchdowns. They just put two other guys in the goal line plays. So I think James could have done it if they put him in the goal line formations, but they decided to let the other guys take the injury risk. And I thought it was interesting that they didn't just give it to only Damon Harris, that they mixed Latavius Murray in as well. So I thought that that aspect was interesting. I still think James Cook is a better version of Devin Singletary. I think that he looks phenomenal on both the rushing and receiving end. I wish that they would trust him with the goal line stuff. I think that he would be probably a top five running back at this point if he also got the goal line carries. Also for the Bills, Gabe Davis had his usual 1 out of 6 really good weeks. I feel like he got 92 yards off 6 receptions and a touchdown. I don't think he's prone to repeat big performances like that. For those of you who started Stephon Diggs, it's a little bit of a disappointment with only 66 yards off of 7 receptions, no touchdown here. Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox had similar weeks, point wise anyway. It looks like they were targeted almost the same amount, 6 targets for Kincaid for 5 receptions, 5 targets for Knox for 3 receptions. Knox got the touchdown. Kincaid got more yardage. So both of these guys are usable depending on your tight end situation. The disappointment to me, although he got a touchdown, was Khalil Shakir. I expected him to have more yardage and more targets. He only got the 1 target, but it did go for a short yardage touchdown. Raiders side, you finally got another Devontae Adams relatively big week, at least for what the offense was putting up. Jacobs got involved in the pass game, which was good to see. No real rushing attack here. It looks like they kind of gave up on the rush. Jimmy Garoppolo came crashing back down to earth after his week 1 performance. I think this is just who Jimmy is at this point, which is why I want to see a different quarterback come in for the Raiders if they're serious about trying to win. Did I cover everything, Jeffrey?
You absolutely did. Are you concerned about Josh Jacobs yet or no?
No, not yet. I know when guys hold out, they typically don't come back 100% ready to play. So as we get into week 3 and 4, if he doesn't pick it up at that point, then I'd be super concerned.
All right.
Now we can come to the what ended up actually being the game of the week, the Seahawks at Lions. For those of you guys who have been listening for a while, you know I like both of these teams. I have money on the Lions winning the NFC this year in playoffs. I really like the Seahawks. I think that they are going to make the playoffs. So this matchup was fun for me to watch. It was a lot of back and forth, and the Seahawks finally got the win in overtime. So I had a lot of fun watching this. I think that there's a lot of takeaways here. Dino looks great. He had one really bad play, but overall, he played phenomenally. I think Jared Goff also played phenomenally. Kenneth Walker is the goal line back. He's the primary back, and it's not even close. On the other hand, David Montgomery was the primary back, and now he's injured. He's looking like he's going to miss a couple weeks. Will they involve Jahmyr Gibbs more? Hopefully they do. They definitely did in the past game. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a little bit more of a quiet game. Yes, he had 102 yards, but he also had a fumble. Kind of takes away from the points. Josh Reynolds looks like the bona fide number 2 wide receiver there and goal line receiving targets there. So Reynolds looks like he's usable wide receiver 3 on a weekly basis, maybe more if he keeps getting touchdowns every week. Sam Laporta looks like a legit tight end 1 candidate for you guys. Outside of that, we'll just monitor who mixes in with running back with Jahmyr Gibbs with the Montgomery injury. DK Metcalf seems to have some issues every week, like start trying to start fights or doing boneheaded plays. But Tyler Lockett bounced back after a poor week 1 performance, got 2 touchdowns, 8 receptions, and 59 yards. Noah Fant actually looked like he was usable this week. Jackson Smith and Jigba is still recovering from a wrist injury, but he still got 5 grabs for 34 yards. So a lot to like with this matchup. However, Jason Myers, the field goal kicker, missed 2 field goals. So that sucks for any of you guys who had him in your starting lineups. Jeff, do you have any other commentary on this or anything to add as well?
Whew. I don't know where Jamison Williams fits in. So that's my first thought on what you had mentioned. I don't know what the Lions do at running back while they're waiting for Montgomery to come back because I don't know if Gibbs is the guy. So there is that. And you know how I feel about Geno Smith. He's shown us 6 quarters of bad Geno and 2 quarters of really good Geno. But as I had said in the offseason, I've seen enough of Geno Smith to know that bad Geno exists. And it has existed this season for 75% of the season so far. He just walked out of Detroit with a win that they probably shouldn't have. And I like that old man Lockett is contributing again. And it does not look like JSN is going to really eat into Lockett or Metcalf's target share this year, which is totally fine to give a receiver 1 year to get fully acclimated with the offense before he gets fully going. That's kind of how I feel about the team. I didn't really have any other takeaways with them this week.
Right. Let's move on to another really befuddling matchup here, and that was the Giants at the Arizona Cardinals. We thought it would be more of a bounce back at the very beginning of the game, but it took until the second half for the Giants to even show up in this matchup. The Cardinals were beating them handedly, which was very strange to watch because, yes, I don't think that the Giants are a playoff team, but I am surprised just how bad they've been in the first 90 minutes of football for them. The first 90 minutes, they were outscored tremendously. So Barkley got hurt in this game, might not play for the next couple weeks. James Conner looks phenomenal. He had a really, really good game. Jeff, what were your takeaways in this matchup?
Okay, so the Giants might be really bad. We just don't know that yet. I did come back from a 21-point deficit, which really gave me a heart attack because they were my survivor pick this week. The Cardinals aren't as bad as advertised, not yet at least. And this is before they get their starting quarterback back, which they do intend to bring back, which they have been impressed with his work ethic and his ability to pick up the playbook and everything like that. So I did notice that Connor and Marquise Brown are making their way into lineup locks as at least a flex play. So there is that. Michael Wilson is lurking already. And what that means is Rondell Moore is probably not startable. He might even be droppable. There is a lot around there, but I wouldn't be touching Rondell Moore at this point. But Barkley is hurt. There's conflicting reports that he's going to miss 3 weeks and that he's going to be a game time decision tomorrow. And that's a pretty big wide window with Brian Daboll. Yeah, we'll see what exactly happens with the Giants this week, but they might get slaughtered by the 49ers, especially without Barkley.
Oh, yeah, and we can certainly talk about that matchup in the next episode, but I will just say Zach Ertz looks like a legitimate tight end one. Michael Wilson looks close to being usable as a wide receiver in fantasy leagues. Marquise Brown looks good. Rondell Moore, I think it was just a bad week. I think he may have usable weeks going forward, but he's more of like a flex option at maximum. The Giants side, I thought their offense looked better when they actually have Jalen Hyatt out there as a field stretcher. When he's not out there, I feel like teams just aren't as threatened. Once he got that 58-yard catch, and then they finally brought him back out for another play because he went a long stretch without a play after that catch for some reason. They really opened up for the Giants, and they were able to start scoring and turn the game around. So he's someone I want to see have more catches and more play time. Waller played pretty well. Without Saquon Barkley, I don't know how this team's going to win because it's going to be Daniel Jones as the leading rusher because Matt Breida, I don't think is that great. Gray, I don't think is that great. As they've got to bring somebody else in if Saquon Barkley's going to miss time. If Saquon Barkley's not 100%, I don't want him out there because I don't want him to risk getting injured again or make it worse. So they're in a tough spot. Cardinals have kind of surprised me a lot. Positive for them because they played better than I expected, and the Giants certainly have been disappointing, but I think the Giants have the better team for this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think there's much else to say about this game other than it gave me a massive heart attack with my survivor pick. But speaking of the San Francisco 49ers, they played the Rams this week. And I'm going to let you get kicked off because I want to know what you think of the Rams now that you've seen them for 2 weeks because you were very down on them entering the season.
So they are better than what I thought they were, but they still can't beat the one of the best teams in the NFC and one of the best teams in football, the 49ers. They certainly gave them a run for their money for a good stretch of that game, but ultimately I don't think that they can compete with the Niners roster talent. Puka looks phenomenal as a mid-round rookie wide receiver that's kind of outperformed guys who were drafted ahead of him. He has the makings of someone that's like a Cooper Kupp, someone he's filling in for, who is a mid-round player and ends up being one of the best wide receivers in football. Also, kind of like an Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's just so many wide receivers historically who have come from the mid or later rounds that have outperformed first and second round wide receivers. And I think Puka is one of those guys. I think Tutu Atwell has been good as well. Where Van Jefferson, someone who I thought would have a better season has been missing 2 weeks in. So that's interesting. Matt Stafford, I think, has played pretty decently. He did have two bad picks. I don't think that you want Stafford throwing 55 attempts per game, especially with his history with his arm and his shoulder, his elbow, like all the injuries that he sustained. I don't think you want him throwing 55 attempts. So that's concerning for me. It looks like Kyron Williams is the number one running back for them going forward, which I find interesting. He's someone who struggled to get good yardage last year. Maybe he wasn't healthy last year, and he's all of a sudden healthy this year. He looks like he's got more burst than I've ever seen him over the past couple seasons. So it's an interesting team that I think is propelled by a pretty solid defense and a couple of good wide receivers right now. So I don't think that they're sustainable. I think they're probably close to an 8-9 win team right now. But I don't think that they'll make the playoffs at this rate, but they'll come close.
Yes, they will. Dang, is Puka the best rookie wide receiver to come out this year?
2 weeks into the season, he is. That's for sure.
I still think there's a role for him when Cooper Cup comes back because I think they both could get 10, 12 targets a game and they both could be beasts. I think Van Jefferson takes a seat, and I think Atwell sees as a guy that would take the lid off of the defense, and I could see Tyler Higbee even scaling back a little bit because I don't think they need him as much anymore. I like Tyler Higbee
Yeah,
too, but I don't think they need him.
yeah. I think it's interesting that their passing offense is going to be so potent whenever Cooper Cup comes back. But with Stafford being the age he is and having the injuries he has, you don't want him actually throwing that much. Maybe with all those guys out there, defense has to spread out. Maybe Kyron Williams will get more effective run at that point too. But on the 49ers side, 49ers look great. It's a shame Brock Purdy didn't get a touchdown, but he did what he needed to get the win.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what do you think about this Cam Akers done in LA again news? Because it looks like it's Kyron Williams' time for right now, and we could see Zach Evans a little bit later in the season.
Yeah, it seems like Cam Akers clashed with McVay last year, and I think that week one didn't make things better. I think he probably complained, and McVay kind of, but I would guess just decided I don't want to deal with you, and we're going to trade him. And they were very open and public about we're going to move forward and trade him, and didn't explain why. So it makes me just think that it's a personal, like he doesn't want to deal with the conflict in the locker room or whatever it is. They're randomly moving on from him, and I don't think that they have another backup besides Zach Evans. So it's looking good for Zach Evans. Hopefully, he can continue to work his way up the depth chart.
Yeah, and this is not how I expected it to happen at all. I do expect some resolution to Akers this week, whether it's a cut or it's a trade, and we'll get to it a little bit later. But there's a few teams with running back needs now, and the Ravens that we already covered is one of them. We can move on now because we do think the Niners are the best team in the league, and the Rams actually stay competitive with them. So we can move forward to the Jets at the Cowboys. The Cowboys win their second matchup very easily. We did not see this coming early in the year, but we can agree that Zach Wilson isn't it. Garrett Wilson does get a score here, so he still is startable in lineups. We look at this matchup, and why did Brees Hall and Delvin Cook only get 4 carries each? Delvin Cook did not look good at all, which is kind of frustrating because it and not frustrating at the same time because it tanked Brees Hall's stock so much that it made him really easy to draft for me. But Delvin Cook did not look good in this game. At the end here, the last thing on this game that I have is Pollard got 25 carries. What happened here? He also had 7 catches. So this is 32 touches for 109 yards. It's not a very good day at the office. It looks good on paper, but yards per touch are garbage. And he's not a back that's large enough to be able to handle this workload week in, week out. So, what are your takes on what the Jets need to do, and then also what the Cowboys are doing with their running game?
So the Jets need to stop turning the ball over. That's the number one thing. Is they Zach Wilson threw 3 interceptions. Dalvin Cook lost a fumble. That's 4 turnovers. So they gave the ball right to the Cowboys. Cowboys just went game manager mode. Like Dak Prescott had a very good stat sheet: 31 for 38, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. The Cowboys just seemed like they just wanted to run out the clock. Why you give it only to Tony Pollard, who one had a broken leg last year, and two hasn't had a full healthy season yet, especially with the full workload. So that I see where you're going with that's interesting why they would do that. It doesn't look like Rico Dodal could get much push either, and Deuce Vaughn is not a between the tackles kind of running back in my opinion. They just don't have the personnel to spell Tony Pollard and keep him healthy. So I think they should be looking for another running back, hopefully soon, who can take some of the punishment. The Jets need to trade for a quarterback, and I think that we've talked about Minshew, right? Like we've talked offline that Minshew would probably be a better quarterback than Zach Wilson at this point. It'd be a great 1 year fill in for Aaron Rodgers if Aaron Rodgers decides to come back next season after his recovery. So that's something that could maybe rejuvenate this team, maybe or another quarterback if they want to bring in another quarterback. But to me, I think Dallas needs to bring in another running back. The Jets need to bring in another quarterback. Dallas also zeroed in on CeeDee Lamb. And they have Jalen Tolbert. They have Brandon Cooks, who was hurt this game, so he didn't play. But they have Michael Gallup. They have multiple tight ends. Why didn't they involve those guys? I don't know. Why did you pepper CeeDee Lamb? Maybe he was on their fantasy team. The number one scorer on the Cowboys was actually their field goal kicker, Brandon Aubrey, who had 5 field goals in this game. That was interesting. It's also concerning that the Cowboys couldn't get any rushing touchdowns.
Oh boy. Yeah, I don't really have much else to add to this, but it does look like the Cowboys are a contender this year, but we'll see what happens when they play an actual team. And I'll throw one other quarterback name out for the Jets. What about Jameis Winston to the Jets?
Yeah, I think he'd be an upgrade over Wilson at this point, but I think Gardner Minshew would be the ultimate option, I would think.
Yeah, I'm not sure the Colts want to let him go with because who plays when Richardson's hurt, I guess is the question. So
Maybe they can get Zach Wilson back in the trade.
do they want that though?
I don't know. All right, let's talk about Washington at the Broncos. And this is one I think we both thought the Broncos would win at home and a bounce back. Looked like at the very end of this game, this very high scoring game, that the Broncos almost tied it up and brought it into overtime, but couldn't get the 2 point conversion after a Hail Mary. Success. Is this concerning to you that Washington, one, if you're in the NFC East, Washington is 2-0. If you're a Broncos fan who thought Sean Payton was going to turn everything around, are you concerned that they're 0-2? Let's start there.
Oh boy. Geez, I didn't expect the Broncos to start off 0-2. I had them making the playoffs, and I don't believe that anymore. I think Mims has become his new Lockett for Russ, but there does appear to be a issue between Russ, Sean Payton. Sean Payton mentioned that he might have to put a wristband on Russ because they're being late getting out of the huddle, and he mentioned Russ by name. So it's getting very dicey early, and they're not even playing bad at all. Like they're actually playing decent, and it's still not going Sean Payton's like way. He's like, we're calling too many early timeouts, which is always one of my biggest pet peeves in games. So I totally get that from Sean Payton's perspective. But it did look like Washington did have complete control of this game, other than that last second Hail Mary, which everyone knows it's a 50-50, probably less than a 50-50 ball. So not even like a really mentionable here. But welcome to the show, Sam Howell. Sam Howell looked good against a good Broncos defense. And Brian Robinson Jr. I'm so excited for him. I was excited for him last year. And then obviously my excitement subsided because of the gunshot wound. And that was a very sad situation. I was wondering if he was ever going to play. But he's catching the ball. He's running the ball. He's the guy there now. Like Gibson is like completely out now. And Robinson's the guy. He can catch. He can run. He's probably a top 15 back through the rest of this year. And especially with Chubb going down now, for sure, he's a top 15 back going forward. So anyone that got any shares of Brian Robinson Jr., congratulations, because he's a back that you would want to own, especially with Howell back there. And he actually seems relatively competent.
Yeah, Brian Robinson has looked great so far in the season. I mean, fully healthy now after the gunshot wound. He's clearly the number one back. He's the one that's making this offense move. Like we look at the receivers and the quarterback play. Like, I think Sam Howell was better this game than week one. I think that Terry McLaurin is slowly getting healthier, and he got that touchdown, which really salvaged his week. I think it's been concerning. A lot of people thought Jahan Dotson was going to pass Terry McLaurin on the score sheet and as the number one receiver. That doesn't look like that's the case so far. He's kind of been disappointing 2 weeks into the season. They've had close games that you would think that he would be involved at some point. So that's kind of concerning to me. But as far as the offense, they clearly look like they were trouncing Denver at certain points. They had some disappointing kicks from their field goal kicker, Joey Sly, who missed two of his four field goal attempts, which is not good. Denver might not even have been in the position to attempt what they attempted at the end of the game if they were down by more than they already were. On the Broncos side, it's concerning for me that Javonte is only getting 12 rushes, and he's not looked very efficient when he does rush. He got vultured at the end zone by Jaleel McLaughlin, who that was his only carry was to vulture a touchdown. Samaje Perine, it looks like he's falling behind a little more. Week one, he was kind of almost split 50-50 with Javonte. This week, he got one carry and just a few catches. So that was interesting. It looks like Javonte is the guy, but he's just not getting the stats that you would want at this point. I don't think he's fully healthy yet, so I guess we'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. Marvin Mims just looks like solely a deep threat. Both of his catches were like really long passes, or really long runs from the catch. That's nice. That's not sustainable, and that's you can't count on that every week. But it's nice to have that element. I just don't think Russell Wilson is ever going to go back to 2017, 2018, like Seattle Seahawk Russell Wilson. I think those days are gone, but he's going to have salvageable weeks. This would have been a decent week to start him. He had 308 yards, three touchdowns, and one pick, but one fumble, but he still, I mean, he would have gotten you points this week. So it's someone who's still usable. I think that, I mean, Denver was in this game. Yes, Washington was better, but Denver was in this game. They were in the previous game against the Raiders. Like a win is coming. Like it's kind of like Game of Thrones. Winter's coming, but a win is coming for Denver at some point. It's going to happen. And also at this point, I don't think Kansas City is unbeatable for Denver either. Kansas City has struggled the first 2 weeks, so it's possible Denver can beat someone like them. The Chargers have struggled a little bit. It's possible they can beat the Chargers. Something something's going to change for Denver at some point, but to me, they're still not a playoff team.
Agreed. And this could get even uglier. And I believe that they brought in Jarrett Stidham. Like, I don't think he was brought in as a backup. I think he was brought in as Russ's replacement if it doesn't get better.
Oh, we will see how that shakes out. But it doesn't look good, and it doesn't look like Sean Payton's going to fix things year one. I think that he starts the fix year one, but I think it's going to take a little bit for him to right the ship there. We have three matchups left. We have now the Sunday night matchup that was the Dolphins at the Patriots, and the Dolphins looked like the better team the whole way through this game. I did think it was interesting that your favorite rookie corner played phenomenally in this game, Gonzalez with the Patriots. I thought he was really good. I thought he helped mute Tyreek Hill on one-on-one coverage. So it's interesting after week one where he got 200 yards that someone was able to bring him back down to earth to 40 yards and one touchdown off of five catches. So that was interesting to me. I know that Raheem Mostert looks like he should change his name to Raheem Must Start. I think that is something that could happen. Ramondre Stevenson got a little bit of a bounce back in points, got a little more points on the rushing side, and hopefully he continues to improve. Tua didn't look great in this game to me, but he did good enough, and it's a tough matchup anytime you play the Patriots defense. Mac Jones still threw for too many passes, in my opinion. Hopefully, it helped you guys for those of you who had to pick them up for a week to fill in or take over in the quarterback role. But Jeff, I know I'm sure you're itching to talk about some of these guys. Let me just say, Hunter Henry had another tight end one performance. So those of you who scrambled to pick them up, good for you. But Jeff, I will let you talk.
Yeah, another guy that I started against you. So we'll say that as long as he's healthy, which it won't be very often this year, you got to start him right now. Wilson's out. A-Chain's still not it yet. So Tyreek was kind of held in check in this game, and they still won pretty handedly. I did notice third downs, conversions. They like to go to Braxton Berrios. I'm a big Berrios fan. If anything happens to Tyreek or Waddle misses time with his concussion, Berrios is a viable flex play for the Dolphins. So it was something interesting to keep an eye out for, see if Waddle gets cleared from the concussion protocol or if he's back. But it did look like Ramondre Stevenson did become the lead back in New England, which is great because we saw way too much Zeke in the first week. It does seem like New England's finally coming around to that. They're not that bad offensively that we thought they would be, but they're still not anywhere to compete with the Bills or the Dolphins right now. And I don't think they would have been able to compete with the Jets with Aaron Rodgers either. But right now, are the Dolphins the best team in the league?
Oh, are they the best team in the league? I don't think they're the best team. They seem like the best offense to me right now. So I'll give them that aspect. I don't think that they're perfect. I think that teams will start to scheme against some of the things that they do well. But if you try to cover one aspect, like you try to shut down one aspect like Tyreek Hill, the other guys seem to show up. So Mostert showed up, Waddle showed up. So it's really hard to shut this offense down entirely. And I don't know how many of you guys watched it and actually listened to the commentary where they're talking about the anticipation in the throws that Tua has. He doesn't have the strongest arm, but he knows when someone's going to be in a certain spot and he doesn't need to see it to throw it. He just trusts his guys because they practice it out and they plan it out so well that he knows the guy's going to be there. So he just throws it in the spot it needs to be, and somebody shows up, catches it, and makes a play. So that's one of the most impressive things with this offense to me is Braxton. I'm not quite there with you on Braxton yet. He just had 2 grabs for 28 yards off of 3 targets. I know he is the return guy there as well. So maybe he'll make more of an impact, like you said, if Waddle misses time this week. But I'm not quite there with you yet. I need to see some more big plays for me to trust that aspect. When it comes to New England, I had some friends that asked me if they should blow their free agency budget on Kendrick Bourne as a waiver wire pickup, but I said don't do it. Like don't waste your money on him. He had 4 catches for 29 yards this week, and that's with Devontae Parker coming back. So I always thought that Henry is the number one option there. Parker would be the number one receiver, and that's what looks like the case. He came back and got the catches. I think Kendrick Bourne might not even be the best player with the initials KB on that offense either. I think when the rookie is ready to go, I think the rookie is going to outshine him as well, and that's the guy out from LSU. Juju has been a nothing burger to me. That's what I always thought when he signed with the Patriots. Kaseki had good and bad plays. I just think Hunter Henry is the receiving option, and so is Ramondre Stevenson. So those are the guys that I want in this offense for the Patriots.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was big on Parker over Juju going into the year, and it felt really weird at the time. But now I feel more vindication with that. But there really isn't too much to say about the Patriots offense. You can start Mac Jones if the matchup's right, but the matchup has to be almost perfect to start him. Ramondre gets started every week, and the Dolphins just fire them all up, I guess, right now. At least the top four.
They are a team that I put money on to win the Super Bowl this year. So I think the Dolphins have a chance. I know my personal betting strategy for people out there is not necessarily the best overall team to win, but the team that has one of the best chances that also has a reasonable high payout. So I really like the Dolphins prior to the year. And as long as Tua stays healthy, as long as Tyreek Hill stays healthy, I think that this offense is near unstoppable.
Absolutely. So we can move on to a game that I do not want to talk about. So I will let you get started.
I'm assuming that's the Saints at Panthers. I will say this, Jeff, that the Panthers played pretty well. It's a close game. They lost by a field goal. So they're very close to being a team that can compete. I think they're already competing, but they're close to a team that's going to start winning games soon, I think. But what did I tell you guys? Last week, I said they're going to start mixing Taysom Hill in at the running back spot for the Saints. What did they do? 9 rushes, 75 yards as a Swiss Army knife quarterback slash tight end slash running back. slash offensive weapon that Taysom Hill is. They needed to use him because Jamal Williams got hurt relatively early on. The only other running back they had was Tony Jones, who they had last year. They cut. He went to the Broncos. The Broncos cut him. Saints signed him to the practice squad. Had to promote him because, as we know, their starter Kamara is suspended. We know that Kendra Miller hurt still, so they only had Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams is now hurt. Tony Jones is going to be the guy going into next week. Obviously, Taysom Hill. It's just going to be involved, and that's just what's going to happen. They're paying this guy way too much money to just sit on the bench. They're going to use him in interesting ways. Chris Olave had a good game. Rashid Shaheed had a second week that was good. Michael Thomas, two weeks in a row, has been involved pretty heavily. I don't think any of the tight ends are usable outside of Taysom Hill. I think Jawan Johnson is not usable at this point. Foster Moreau, not usable. He makes also boneheaded plays out there. Blake Groupie getting some points out there for those of you who picked him up. I think he's one of the better kickers at this point. At least he's going to get you some points because the Saints seem to struggle getting touchdowns. But on the Panthers side, I don't think that Bryce Young has been lights out. He hasn't been terrible, but he seems to struggle with deep passes and he seems to struggle with passes down the sidelines. Miles Sanders hasn't been what I had hoped he would be. I thought he'd get some bigger plays, get some more yardage. Hasn't quite happened yet. Their offensive line is also going through some injury woes, so you can explain it a little bit that way. I know people won't say no excuses, but there is some rational explanations and rationale why things don't work out the way that you want them to. Adam Thielen looks like he was the number one option this week for Bryce Young. Chuba Hubbard was surprisingly used as a receiving option quite a lot out of the backfield. And I was a little disappointed Hayden Hurst didn't get more involvement. They look like they're trying to make Jonathan Mingo a thing with 8 targets, but he only secured 3 of those for 26 yards. I mean, that's really all I can say about this team right now. They're not quite there. They have some pieces, but they're just not quite there to win games yet, and that's unfortunate. Jeff, do you have any thoughts on this matchup?
Nope, no thoughts other than I don't believe Derek Carr was worth the money for the Saints. It's been 2 performances that have been pretty lackluster, and the defense pretty much won them both of their games so far. So interesting to note that they paid him a lot of money for a lot of years, and I don't believe that they're much better than they were last year.
He might not even be the best quarterback on that roster.
Fair enough. I'm sure that everyone's seen on social media how Jameis Winston is greeting everyone as they come in. Like he seems to be the real locker room leader.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's hard for them to move on from Carr at this point. I think they gave him a decent amount of guaranteed money, so it's hard for them to just switch to Winston.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, are you ready to talk about the last matchup here? Another slugfest between division rivals, and that's the Cleveland Browns at the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we have to cover that. Obviously, Nick Chubb got a season-ending knee injury that looked pretty bad. I don't know if he'll recover in time for the start of the season, but they're still finding out exactly the extent of the damage to his knee, but it certainly didn't look good for those of you who saw it. Those of you who haven't, it just knee bent in a way that isn't physically possible, so it's clearly broken in several ways. Jerome Ford came in and he looked pretty solid. I don't know if he'll be able to get the spacing that he got in future games as the likely starter, presumed starter, in the running back spot. To me, I don't think Deshaun Watson or Kenny Pickett at the quarterback spots for both Cleveland and the Steelers looked good. I don't think either one of them really did. I don't think Najee Harris looked good. Jalen Warren looked okay as a receiving back, but he also couldn't get much going on the ground either. Amari Cooper wasn't supposed to play this game, and all of a sudden said, "Oh no, we're gonna activate him, and we're gonna see if he's good to go." He got 10 targets, caught 7 of them for 90 yards. It's pretty good for someone who was supposed to miss this game. Elijah Moore has not shown up on the field yet. Njoku isn't quite producing what you'd want from the tight end position. There's not much else to note about the Browns offense at this point. The Steelers' George Pickens had quite the game. He had a huge 71-yard touchdown grab and ended up with 4 grabs for 127 yards. So that was one of the few bright spots for the offense there for Pittsburgh. But the story there is both defenses here had quite the night. That's really all I've got for this matchup. Jeff, do you have anything else to elaborate on or add?
Just my season, watching my season go up in smoke with Nick Chubb. But obviously, first and foremost, I'm glad that his leg is still intact after that injury. If people have seen it, I'm sorry you've seen it. If you haven't seen it, don't go out of your way to see it because it is disgusting. And he's clearly out for the year, and he's going to go through a long bit of rehab to get back to where he was before next year. I don't know if Jerome Ford can lead this backfield. It does seem like Pittsburgh had a bend but don't break mentality where they were going to let Nick Chubb run down to the red zone and then stop them in the red zone because that's what was happening all game. Same thing happened when Jerome Ford got in. So I'm not sure that Jerome Ford is this good or if it was game plan specific. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. I just think that there could be a free agent coming in.
Yeah, it looks like so the Browns, some of the other teams that we've covered, maybe Minnesota, maybe Dallas, maybe Baltimore. Like some of these teams probably looking at a running back. Indianapolis. I know they added Trey Sermon to the practice squad, who might get promoted at some point. A lot of these teams are looking at running back health, and there's certainly some running backs still available in free agency. Probably some running backs that are available via trade. So a lot of these teams will be looking to make a move. As far as the Browns go, Deshaun Watson better pick up his game because all that guaranteed money just makes the Browns look foolish and make sure that it's never going to happen for a quarterback again, in my opinion. I don't think anyone's going to get that level of guaranteed money again. And when it comes to the Steelers, Matt Canada probably needs to get fired. Kenny Pickett doesn't look that great. He's the one I had concerns with prior. Like I didn't like him during the draft process last draft, and I think he's got small hands. I don't think he's quite the size that you want to be. I don't think that he's quite it. I know he's a hometown guy, and he was the best quarterback in his draft class, but he's not good. And now they're kind of in a situation where I don't think that they're going to be able to get a better quarterback for a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's time for Pittsburgh to move on from Pickett this offseason, but will they? Because they tend to stay loyal too long. And they have to Matt Canada, and it looks like Kenny Pickett might be the next part of that.
That does it for another episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you all for listening and downloading this episode. Please do not forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Every little bit helps.
As always, you can find us with our handle at N2EFantasy on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, X, and Threads. Please give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.